Everyone. In today's show, we dive below deck and into the lives of the crew that serve you as we talk with ex-crew member and author Cathryn Chapman. We have another fun picture sent in by you and some more fun information for first-time cruisers. I am Matt, your lovely host, and this is Cruise Week TV Live. Welcome to Cruise Week Live. I am Matt here with another week of fun, interactive guest chats and cruise information from a total newbie. Yes, I have only been on one ship to date, but that's okay, because we find the experts to join us and share their tips and experience with you all so we all get to learn together. This week, it's about sex, lies, and cruising. No, I'm not talking about the guests, but more the crew. We're joined by past crew member turned author Cathryn Chapman. She has written a very revealing book on what I would like to say loosely on her experiences as a young crew member and takes us into the hidden world of one of the megaships. But before we talk to Cathryn, I want to tell you about something I just started to use this last week at work. It's called Uber Eats. You're probably familiar with Uber, right? The car ride service that's faster and cheaper than a taxi? Well, now they deliver food from your favorite restaurants for a flat fee of $4.99. All you need to do is use the Uber Eats app, find the restaurant you want to eat from, the entire menu comes up, then you click the items you want, and that's it. It's paid through the Uber app automatically. You can even see when the food is on its way on the app and exactly where the delivery driver is. Now, one thing I realized is if you're going to a restaurant, you would tip way more than $5 for a nice meal for two. So this saves you even more money that way. To get you started, I want to give you $15 of free food with the code featured below. This also lets our sponsors know how well it's working, so please have a meal delivered using our code, and that helps support our show. Try Uber Eats today. Now, without further ado, let's bring our guest of the night. Hey, Cathryn, how's it going?
Hey Matt, good. Thank you for having me.
Of course, it's more than our pleasure to have you on our show. So, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm living in Brisbane, Australia, where it's actually currently lunchtime on Sunday, so the future is very bright. Well, at least it is here. It's very warm. I am a mother of a 5-year-old boy. What else? I worked on cruise ships briefly in my 20s and briefly again in my 30s because I'd forgotten what it was like the first time,
Hmm.
and then I wrote a book about it.
Nice. Have you ever written a book before, Sex, Lies, and Cruising?
No, that was my first one.
Not too bad for your first book. So, what is it like to become an author? Like, what are the steps you have to do to kind of become one?
Well, an interview that I saw with a writer of like half a dozen books at the time when I was in the middle of kind of struggling through writing this one said that being not necessarily about talent, it's about commitment, dedication, and hard work. And
Hmm.
I found that to be true. Um, I had to work like I had a full-time job when I wrote this book. So and I had a baby, a newborn baby. I
Hmm.
basically had to write 7 nights a week for 3 months just to get the second half of the book written. So it's like a lot of work and a lot of commitment, and you have to keep your eye on the goal. And it's the only way that you'll ever finish a book.
So, what do you think was more difficult? Doing a 6 month contract on a ship or writing a book? What took a lot more effort and work?
Hmm. Being on a ship, I guess, is probably harder because you're trapped, and if it's
Hmm.
not really as you expected it to be, you can't get away from it, I suppose. But then, yeah, writing a book is still a lot of commitment because I actually read a statistic that 90% of Americans want to write a book, 5% of them start the book, and about 2% of those 5% finish the book. So
Hmm.
it is also hard work. It's just different.
So Albert asked, Matt, what type of beer are you drinking? I am drinking a Bud Light, Albert, hashtag not sponsored. We have another question from Ken Jordan. He asked, what ship did you work on?
I've worked on 4 ships for 2 different cruise lines,
Hmm.
all quite briefly, and I was legally advised not to say what ships, because if people read the book, they will know why the companies, the cruise lines aren't especially keen for people to know what really happens below deck. So yeah, I've never revealed who it was that I worked for.
Gotcha. No worries. We have
Sorry, doesn't
Amanda
that just want to make you
Gary
find out the
asks.
truth?
I know, right? Amanda Gary asks, loving the book so far, just started, and it's so on point. I've worked on a couple ships for a decade. So, with your book, it's a fiction, nonfiction. How would you describe it exactly?
I would describe it as fiction. My mentor that I used to help me get started with the book said to me, take the real story and then throw it as inspiration and then throw it away and write a good book, because real life doesn't really make good reading, because, you know, a good book follows certain like plot lines and things like
Hmm.
that. So I would say there's a fair few things in there that are very much inspired by things that I saw. Um, but there's also a bunch of completely made up things which I had to use to make the story work properly. But having said that, the things that are made up are certainly not beyond the realms of possibility, because they happen all the time. And, you know, stories of stories, and you hear things, yeah, all of
Hmm.
it could have happened. I just maybe didn't see it.
Could you give us a little brief synopsis, almost like a summary of the whole book without any spoilers for people who haven't read it yet?
Yeah, you cut out briefly there, but I think you were asking me just to give a brief synopsis of the book.
Hmm.
Um, the main character is named Ellie. It's a girl in her late 20s from London whose boyfriend, fiance, actually cheats on her, and she just wants to run away from life. And she decides that the best way to do that is to go and work on a ship. And then she basically discovers what it's really like, that everything wasn't as it appeared. So the book is her journey of discovery on what goes on ships and how that affects her.
Nice. There
But
were.
it is kind of a comedy as well. It's not all depressing. It's like it's
Mhm.
meant to be funny at the same time.
I really enjoyed the upbeat characteristic of her roommate Caitlin quite a lot. It was very inspiring. A couple dark turns in there for Caitlin, but it was a fantastic read. For any of you who have not read the book, it's Sex, Lies, and Cruising. Definitely check it out. Amanda Gary asks, did you originally plan on making the book nonfiction?
That is an excellent question. Kind of, yes. So I've done a lot of traveling and lived in, New York, London, Paris, and worked on the ships, etc. And people would often say to me, "You should write a book about your life." But I felt like, who's going to want to read about me? Like, I'm just this nobody chick, right, from Brisbane. So
Hmm.
I thought about it, and then I thought, well, if I write fiction, it's kind of more fun because I get to talk about whatever I want, and it doesn't have to be true. So I'm not going to offend anyone and whatever. I did loosely think about that for quite a while.
Nice. A couple questions that I'm definitely zoning into with people listening. They say, how much of Ellie is you, or would you say you're more like some other characters?
Um, Look, I'm not really like any character. There is a character in the book, which is not Ellie, who is, of all the characters, if there was one person who was closest to a real person, there is one character who's kind of close to a real person that I
Don't
knew
say
quite well.
Maria.
I'm not going to say who it is. You have to guess. But Ellie, I would say, has had some similar experiences to me, but she's not me.
Gotcha. Nice. What was your most difficult part about writing your book, would you say?
Look, apart from the actual finishing it, like it was really just like getting through the 20 or so chapters, like knowing I was getting towards the end. I
Hmm.
think it was at times deciding on what I wanted to include that was real and what wasn't, and deciding like, are people I know going to recognize themselves and be offended or angry with me, because that happens obviously, which is why I started getting more and more fiction, I guess, in
Hmm.
it. Um, So the balancing act was a bit difficult, but yeah, in reality, it was really just getting it finished on top of a full-time job.
Yeah, that seems like it'd be kind of difficult to do. With your book, Ellie, the main character, is an aspiring photographer. What did you do on the ships when you were on your contracts?
My first contract actually was a photographer. And I made her a photographer because I thought it's much easier to write about a job that you know
Hmm.
about than a job you don't know about, like any fiction writer, I guess. Especially, I figured your first book, it's probably less, you take away some of the challenge to write something you know. My second lot of contracts, when I went back in my 30s to a different cruise line, I was a junior assistant cruise director.
Hmm. We have Carissy Colley asking, what is the worst part about working on a cruise ship, and how in the world do you remember all the passengers' names when the ship turns every 3 to 8 days?
All right, two questions. So, the worst part for me, I used to call it a floating moral vacuum. So, although I was no angel and I went on there single and, 21 the first time, so, it was like a party. Um, I did find it really difficult to cope with the lying and the cheating and all the people who were cheating on partners at home and partners on the
Hmm.
ship and people who were cheating on you and lying to each other. That was hard. And also the not fake friendships, but I guess the surface level friendships, because I'm someone who really values good friends and who values having someone I can trust.
Hmm.
I didn't really feel like there was anyone I could trust, because I felt for a lot of the time, I guess that changed a little bit over time. I did end up making a good friend, but you kind of feel like, because you may never see someone again after your contract, like some cruise lines have 20 cruise ships and you
Hmm.
don't necessarily stay on the same one. In fact, you rarely do. You'll do your contract, then when you go on vacation, they fly someone else in to replace you. So when you come back from vacation, they just put you on another ship, so you could go anywhere. And people know that they may never see you again. And particularly my first contracts, there was no Facebook. Like there was an internet in the late
Hmm.
90s, but it wasn't as prolific as it is now. People didn't feel the need to develop deep friendships because it was a transient lifestyle. So a day-to-day existence where you're 24/7 with the same people, like you feel like half of them are lying to you and the other half are being fake to you. It just didn't feel like a very good
Yeah.
environment.
Do you keep in touch with anyone now from your previous contracts, or how spaced out were you with your contracts?
So when I was 21, which was 21 years ago, um, I I've only kept in contact with one person, and this is the power of Facebook, because I didn't have it
Hmm.
then. It was hard, but I had one particular friend who now is like a roadie for Guns N' Roses. We we really Facebook came on board,
Hmm.
but my second lot of contracts were 10 years later, which was in my early 30s, and I've kept in contact loosely with a handful of those people, one of which I've seen a couple of times because she still works on ships years later,
Hmm.
and whenever she comes to Brisbane, we would catch up. But then some of the people I worked with who I thought, particularly one person I was really close to, my roommate, in fact, lives in the same city as me, and we never see each other.
Hmm. That's kind of weird. Were you
Yeah,
guys, how are roommates when you're on a cruise ship? Because you get automatically assigned one, right?
correct. I think you can really hit the jackpot or not. My first roommate ever, her and I did not get on really at all. I think there was some surface level attempts to get on, and I'm a peacemaker, so I tend to try and get on with people. But I think we just clashed over different things, really over boys, and that didn't go very well. You're in like this teeny tiny little room with bunk
Hmm.
beds. We had no window in this dark room. It was not very good. The roommates I had many years later, we had a good time when we were cruise staff. I shared with three different girls over this
Hmm.
couple of months because people were getting transshipped and then one finished their contract, and we got on great. We had a party. We told each other everything. You kind of find out a lot more than you really think you want to know about someone when you share a cabin with them.
In the book, you were talking about different ranking systems where, there were bottom, middle, and kind of top. Can you kind of go over that a little bit?
Yep. So at the three different sort of areas, I guess you would call it, is you've got crew, who are like, cleaners, maintenance people, room stewards, waiters, all those kind of jobs, and their crew. So they will tend to have the cabins lower down and in the middle, no portholes. Some of them
Mm-hmm.
share four to a room, some of the
Ooh.
waiters and things on some of the ships. So they've got like two sets of bunk beds. And they eat in a crew mess, which is kind of like, we don't have cafeterias at school here in Australia, but I know in the US, I guess you do.
Mm-hmm.
The crew mess is kind of like a cafeteria, but smaller. And they would eat, certainly on the ships I was on, they would eat whatever the chefs felt like cooking that day. So if the chef was Filipino, you would eat something Filipino, and it was kind of just whatever. And you still get looked after, like,
Mm-hmm.
you still have some of the same, but the same basic kind of needs all met for you. The next level up is staff, which it varies from cruise line to cruise line. So on one cruise line where I was photographer, we were staff, and staff is, photographer and like staff and, beauty salon people, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got more privileges. So when you're crew, after you're at work, like when you're not at work, you're not allowed anywhere else on the ship. You basically have to be in the crew area only. But of course, you still get off the ship when you have time. But if you're a crew, you're less likely to have time off because you probably work really long days, 7 days a week. With staff, you have a bit more time off when the ship is in port. If you're not working, anyone is allowed to get off the ship when they're not working generally. But if you're staff, you've probably got more time off, because a lot of the staff roles, like when I was a photographer, I only worked when the ship was sailing.
Mm-hmm.
So
How
when
much
you're in
free time
port,
do you think you had?
I had more free time. In the photo shop, I had more free time than not. So I used to work from 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. with 1 hour off for dinner. And then all day on it at sea day. Everyone hates at sea days. But when I was cruise staff, sometimes you'd get up early to do tender tickets, and then you'd be up late doing, shows, and then going to the nightclub, and you're sort of all over the place. But crew could easily work. They say you're not supposed to work more than 8 hours a day, but I don't know if that really happens. And then at the top, and staff can go to bars and stuff like that in their own time, like the passenger bars.
Oh, that's
So
pretty good to know.
we used to have a 1:30 curfew. So if we finished work at 11, we had 2.5 hours we could go to passenger bars, as long as we were in uniform, until 1:30, and then we had to sort of be out of sight. When I was cruise staff, we had to be in passenger bars and in the nightclub and stuff like that. Right at the top, you've got all your officers, who are, I guess that's pretty obvious. They're all the people involved in driving the ship and sort of that more high level stuff, the guys with the white uniforms and the stripes. And they tend to have the most privileges. They're the ones who are occasionally sneaking passengers back to their cabins, which is a big no-no normally. They have their own mess. Staff have their own mess as well, but officers have their own mess with like the passenger menu, eating the same food as the passengers, being served by waiters, that sort of thing. And when I was on my second cruise line as cruise staff, we were considered officers. So we actually got to use the officers' bar and the officers' mess.
That sounds like a pretty sweet deal to me.
Yeah, but the pay was lower than
What do
the
you
cruise
think?
staff on my old cruise line
Hmm,
used to make.
what do you think is more entertaining to be at for crew and staff? Do you think it's more better to be at passenger bars or crew bar?
Probably crew bar. You kind of get tired of it because it's the same people all the time, and at least with passenger bars you've got a bit of variety, although we used to kind of take over certain passenger bars. But
Hmm.
there were a lot more rules.
Yeah, I imagine there would be.
Yeah.
We have a
So
question. Sorry, go ahead.
yes. No, at the crew bar, kind of anything goes.
Hmm. So
And you can wear what you want.
one of the big rules on the cruise ships, from what I've heard and probably broke, is that you can't hook up with passengers. So Ron Hiller asked, so how often would crew members hook up, and where would they go if they wanted to do the hoochie?
Wow. I don't even want to know what the hoochie is, but look, it is a sackable offence. It's really, really serious. It's a big legal risk for the cruise line because, you know, if a passenger hooks up with you, they've had too much to drink. The next day they
Hmm.
could say, oh, you know, this happened against my will. So it's
Yeah.
just the cruise line just say, if you do it, you're out. And they will literally, like, there were 3 waiters on one ship I was on who got caught just kissing some female passengers up on the top, like the top deck at night. They got dropped off the next morning. I think I can't even remember, Barbados or somewhere. They just dropped them off and left them there and said, go home. Like, it's really serious. Having said that, naturally, it still happens. I knew officers, you know, that I used to hang out with when I was a photographer who they had girls back to their cabins somewhat regularly, but
Hmm.
they used to say that because they were officers, that the security guards respected them and would turn a blind eye to things. Whereas on that same ship is where those guys got kicked off, the waiters got
Hmm.
kicked off. So there is kind of a hierarchy going on a lot of the time. Um, but for the most part, I would say it's rare for people to hook up with passengers because it's just too much risk. You don't want to risk your job. But officers and the cruise director tend to get away with it because a lot
Hmm.
of the time their cabins are actually up high, right? So when the passenger cabins are along a hallway, at the
Hmm.
end of that hallway, you've got a little door. It goes through to the staff and officer cabins. If you wanted to take someone to your cabin, you'd say to them, you know, go
Hmm.
down the hallway at 11:30, and then you would open the door for them, and bam, they're inside, and no one's
Yep.
going to see them.
What
So it
What
does
about
happen.
crew and crew hooking up? How often do crew members usually hook up with other crew members? In the book, it seemed like it
How
was a
many
pretty
hours are there in a
frequent.
day? Yeah,
Oh
how many
God,
hours are there in a day to fit that in?
that's so pretty excessive amounts then.
Yeah, pretty excessive amounts. And, you know, in some cases, so the ratio, it depends on the cruise line, and I think it's changing over the years. But my first ship, there were 8 men to 1 woman in the crew.
Ooh.
By the time I was a bit older, I think it was much more even. So, you know, and the other thing is, not all, in the eyes of the women, not all the guys are created equal. So if there is like a good looking, charismatic officer,
Hmm.
he's probably possibly not limited to 1 woman in a day.
Oof. So yeah, pretty hectic life there. Definitely sexually
Yeah,
promiscuous then under the sea deck.
very. There's good reason that they make everyone do STD tests before they go on board.
That I was just about to ask about that. So that's good that they kind of screen everyone. Good.
Yes.
We have a couple more questions coming in. Carissa asks, how do you remember everyone's name for passengers when they
Oh,
kind of go
yeah.
back and
Sorry, I'd
forth?
forgotten that question. Um, well, you don't. But it depends on your job.
Mm-hmm.
For some jobs, it really pays them, like waiters. You know, the waiters usually are amazing, and probably a lot of the crew, like waiters and other people, I have to say, aren't quite as involved in all the promiscuous activity I've been talking about, because a lot of them are hardworking family members who just send money home to their family, and I should say that. But you know, those guys, the difference of remembering your name or not can make a big difference to what tips they get, and a lot of them really do survive and rely upon their tips. So I never got tips; it wasn't part of my role, but yeah, for
Mm-hmm.
other people, it's big. So they would, I guess, have some sort of system where they would remember the people who came to the dining room. But now that there's this freestyle dining, it's much more difficult for those guys. You know, I guess cruise lines still have their set seating and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There used to be all you could do, where you would sit at the same table for every meal. And those waiters would, you know, they'd only have 10 or 20 people's names to remember. When you're like me, cruise stuff where you actually are theoretically socializing with all 2,000 passengers, I would say I would remember.
Yeah.
There was often one or two families who'd be really nice to you on a cruise. Like I did make friends with the family I do keep in touch with. And, you know, you would meet them on your first night and then the whole cruise you would remember them. But in reality, the likelihood of me remembering names of more than those sort of couple of families and like a handful of individuals is, you know, is very low. And I'm good at names, but there are just so many people and they're always changing their clothes and you're seeing them this bar and then that bar and then, you know, on the dance floor and then playing sport. People aren't in context, so it's very difficult to remember them.
That I can barely remember my teachers from high school, and I saw them, you know, for at least 4 years. Can't remember their names anymore. So I could definitely see
Yeah,
how that's kind of hard to do.
yeah.
Moving along, Patty Martin asks, how long does it take to advance?
To advance?
You get like
Um,
promotions or in your job.
Yeah, well, it can really depend. Like, I knew some people who were junior assistant cruise directors who would advance at the end
hmm
of every contract. So they do one contract as a junior, and then maybe if someone left, the next contract they'd be an assistant cruise director, and then, you know, a like a deputy or a senior and then a deputy, you know what I mean? Like that, some people have gone up quite quickly, but
hmm
usually that's if you really play the game, you know, you kiss ass to your boss and do and work overtime and doing right in time. You need that she is
hmm
a cruise director. They need to love you to advance you, and if they love you, you can advance quite quickly. In other roles like waiters, you know, they have the junior waiters and then the waiters and then the head waiters. I think that all comes down to just how hard you work,
hmm
and they work really hard. I take my hats off to some of the guys and girls in those jobs. Incredible. But it's just sort of how hard you work, and if you're remembering people's names and if you're getting food out there and you're not making mistakes and you're rushing off your feet all the time, you know, then maybe 2 or 3 contracts into it, you might get a promotion. But obviously with a hierarchy, there are less and less people at the top. So it's harder and harder to keep getting promoted because there are only so many spaces at the top. And the good thing is not everyone wants to be promoted, I guess, because the more promotion has more responsibility, although more money.
hmm Ooh, we have a question from one of our previous interviewees. Pippa Madden asks, would you recommend working on board a cruise ship?
Oh, Pippa from Australia. Is that Pippa
Yes.
I heard was the Aussie you spoke to
Yep.
the other week? Um, hmm. Look, I kind of have that philosophy of not regretting anything that I've done because, well, if I didn't work on a cruise ship, I couldn't have written a book about it.
hmm
It wasn't for me, but I'm still glad I did it from the perspective of having the experience. So I would say yes, it can be a really good way of saving money, but you have to be really, really dedicated and committed and not party too hard, which is really hard because you're
Yep.
bored. So if I had my time again, I would probably develop a hobby or something I wanted to do where I would be compelled to go back to my room straight after work and do that hobby rather than go out and partying. So, you know, maybe I'd say I'll write a book in my spare time or I would do something. That would be good to have that motivation because it's really, and Pippa, tell me if you agree, because it's really, really hard to resist the parties.
Hmm. I know I would be really tempted to go to party, but you know, I'm also probably about the same age, 22. So I really like partying. It was very difficult not to kind of find myself at a bar. That was kind of where I gravitated to majority of the time. So we
Yes.
got a final question coming in. Um, so what do you do now besides writing books?
Well, the second and third books are coming along very slowly because I certainly didn't make enough money to quit my day job. But I've worked in marketing on and off and public relations for the last 15 years. But actually, right now, I'm about to graduate as a coach, like a life and relationships coach.
Oh, nice.
I've started
Congratulations.
a new business. Hmm?
hmm I said congratulations.
Thank you. I'm really passionate actually about, I initially started with wanting to save relationships, and I've created a course to help people save relationships that you get your tasks every day by SMS that help you sort of be a more loving and giving partner, which improves your relationship. So that's all part of Love Spark Me, which is my new business with coaching and courses.
Mhm.
That's really my main passion. I still marketing and marketing work on a sort of freelance part-time basis. And if everyone on your show bought my book today, then I'll commit to pumping out book 2 and 3. I won't do anything else for 6 months, and you'll find out what really happens,
Ooh,
who does
nice.
something very unexpected, and who has a baby. It's all planned. I just need time to write it.
Nice. Very tempting. So I know I said last question, but I came up with one final thought of if people are interested in becoming a crew member, what's one piece of advice you would give new crew members going on for their first contracts?
Um, to use your money wisely, um, because you get given a little card like the passengers, like a little credit card, and what you spend gets taken out of your salary. So it's really easy, just like a credit card, it's really easy to just keep swiping
Hmm.
that card and buying stuff. Um, I would just say have a really firm plan with what you want to do with your money, because people who save can earn a lot of money. I know people who have been on a few years and have come home and have bought businesses and stuff, or bought homes, even for cash. So yeah, I would just say be careful with your money, because you have to decide what your priorities are.
Good sound advice. Well, thank you so much for being on a show, Cathryn. I really enjoyed
Thank
talking to you and especially going deeper into the book.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And to anyone who wants to buy it, when you read it, send me a message on Facebook and ask me some more questions.
Of course, of course. Well, you have a splendid Sunday afternoon. Okay, so moving on to our next segment, we have the picture of the week. So this week's picture comes from Annie Tavares, pictured here with her bestie on the Carnival Cruisers Past, Present, Futures Diva Cruise in 2015. Doesn't that ocean and drinks just look absolutely amazing? They look like they're having quite a lot of fun there. So again, that's the Carnival Cruisers Past, Present, Future Diva Cruise on 2015. I think they actually have a couple more cruises coming up with the Divas that we've been getting quite a lot of offers from that we're looking into it. We're looking into it a bit. Again, guys, if you want to be featured on our Picture of the Week 7, you can send your face with a little bit of information on where you were and some personal information there to photos@cruiseweek.tv. Also, tell us where the photo was taken, and yeah, you guys could have a chance to be featured on our show. So again, guys, if you really liked us, give us a like, give us a little comment here or there. Tell us what you like, tell us what you don't like, and we can try to improve our show in the future. Give us a share, and if you guys subscribe to us on YouTube or on the site itself, then you guys can get some notifications here and there. If you guys really love us a lot, you can go to our support page, which is cruiseweek.com/support. Mention us, and by giving us a little bit of support, we'll put you into our Cruise Week special Inner Circle segment on Facebook, where you get to know a little bit more about some of our hidden features, get a little bit of access quicker to the show, and a little sneak peeks before anyone else does. So, guys, I really enjoyed talking to Cathryn Chapman. Again, her book is Sex, Lies, and Cruising. Really fantastic read. I could not put the book down. So, if you guys are interested in it, check it out on Kindle or Amazon. Really good read. Well, I am out of beer. I got a little last couple drops of foam. Mm. So, I'm going to get a refill before I head out. And as always, guys, we'll see you on the ships.